All right. Hi, everybody. It is 8:31 p.m. Welcome to Chat with the Hiring Expert. I am Alana. I am not the hiring expert. I'm the manager of the Campus Rep program here at WayUp, the largest website helping college students find jobs and internships. I am about to introduce Liane. She is our hiring expert. She's the manager of university partnerships here at WayUp. Before she came to WayUp, we're so happy to have her. She used to work as a recruiter over at RBC Capital Markets and Venmo, among some other really, really cool places. She has interviewed, spoken to hundreds, thousands of college students, so she really knows her stuff when it comes to, what to say at your career fair, how to make your resume perfect. Should I send a thank you note? You always should. So it is my pleasure to introduce Liane.
Hey everybody, it is so wonderful to be here and thank you so much for that introduction. Figured I could spend a few minutes talking through just some advice I have generally about things like career fairs, your resumes, interviews, and then would love to spend a lot of time answering questions. I think that's probably the most meaningful way to do this. And I know we have a few resumes to go through as well, which we're really pumped about. So a few real life examples. And again, I'd love to answer your questions. So I guess I'll dive right in and first touch on career fairs, which I know you all are probably going through a ton of right now and can be really, really stressful. But I'd say my first big advice is just do not panic, do not stress, and be yourself. And I would say that about really anything we're talking about when it comes to careers. As a campus recruiter myself, I would say some of the best interviews that I ever was a part of were things that were very conversational. We were talking peer to peer. We were talking really honestly. So I would just reiterate, be yourself, don't be too nervous, practice makes perfect. But in speaking specifically to career fairs, I would say really take initiative and go say hello. Probably before your career fair, you can see who's going to be there, take the time, do a little research, what companies are you interested in, and just make sure you go and you say hello to those folks. They're there to answer your questions, so do not be afraid. I think if you go with friends, don't just stick with your friend the entire time. Don't let them ask all of the questions, but really, I'd say show initiative and get your face seen and your name heard, because that's going to go a really long way. And I'd also reiterate that career fairs are really for you. They're for the students. They're for the students to learn. They're normally pretty early in the recruitment process. So don't be afraid to ask any question too big or too small, and try to ask things that are interesting too. It's a great way to differentiate yourself. So I definitely recommend being talkative and not being afraid to say hello and introduce yourself. The recruiter will love that. I think in terms of what to bring, what to wear, I'd say most career fairs now still function on paper resumes. I know myself, I was most previously at a fintech company, a mobile payments app called Venmo, and we generally did a lot of stuff online. So we would get people's names on the sign-in sheet and always have our cards so students could follow up for us, but we weren't always collecting paper resumes. That's probably 50-50, but so I'd always have resumes with you just in case. But also if somebody says, actually, I'd prefer you apply online, don't feel like that's anything negative on you. That's probably just what the process calls for. I'd always recommend asking for business cards if you're interested. And following up, I love to get really thoughtful thank you notes. So if you did have a good conversation with someone, don't be afraid to follow up with them. In terms of dress code, I'd definitely recommend doing a little research and seeing what your career fair or career center recommends. For things like startups, I'd say that you might be able to wear whatever you're normally wearing to class, but if it's something more like financial services, you perhaps have to get that business casual. So I know I was at a career fair recently for WayUp, and it was much more casual than the traditional career fair. So I'd say just do a little bit of digging, ask your career services professionals. They'd love to help, so you can figure out the right things to wear there. Next, we'll go on to, I guess, just a little bit of interview advice. So hold on 1 second.
I had a quick question that came in, actually, about WayUp profiles.
Yeah.
What do you think the best way, if you're at a career fair, to maybe show your WayUp profile is?
Totally. I think first of all, having it on your phone, having it on your mobile app, and letting the recruiters know. I'd say tons and tons of recruiters know about WayUp, so you should be able to tell them, but even to show them when you follow up in a thank you email, that is such a good place to include that WayUp profile. I think especially in a sea of resumes, being able to show that you're tech savvy, you're proactive, and you can send that goes a really, really long way. So I definitely recommend always having it with you on your phone, but even more so, I'd say following up with an email with that profile highlighting, that would go a long way.
If anything, it could differentiate you at one of these career fairs.
Totally. I think, again, especially a lot of more tech-focused companies are moving away from paper resumes and are trying to find other ways to collect things that are a little bit easier and feel a little bit more tech-centric and tech-savvy. So being able to show a recruiter that you've been proactive, you have something that isn't just physical paper in a sea of papers will go a really, really long way.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful. Of course. Please keep those questions coming. Next, going on to interview advice, I'd say a lot of the same things with career fairs. Certainly be yourself. Do not stress too much. You get better and better with practice. So I think first and foremost, be prepared for your interview. You have already gotten way further than a lot of other applicants in the process. You should be so proud of yourself, but really, really come prepared, know about the company, do some research about what the culture is like, ask who you're meeting with, look them up online. The company might have a WayUp profile themselves with a lot of information. Please look at that, see what you can learn about the company. So you go in there, you're confident about the questions they're going to ask you. I'd say, I can't stress enough, and I know from personal experience, my first interview, my junior year for an internship was just not me at my best. I was so nervous, I was so underprepared, and the whole process just got easier and easier as I went along. So use resources like your friends to practice. The fact that you all are on a hangout like this shows that you want to be prepared. So that's really amazing. Use all of these opportunities. Use your career centers for advice and for practice. I can't stress it enough. If you are prepared, you're going to be more confident and you're going to be able to more eloquently explain your story, and that's just going to go such a long way in the interview process. One thing that you'd think would go without saying, but oftentimes doesn't, is be on time. And by be on time, I mean be early. If you need to hang out at a coffee shop down the street for 15 minutes while you wait until it's 5 or 10 minutes before your interview, do that. I know so many times people come really frazzled or upset because they're late for an interview because the public transportation got stuck or security took longer than they anticipated, whole bunch of reasons. And it's certainly not a make or break, but it's going to put you a little out of ease and your interviewers potentially a little out of ease. So just always be early, but don't be too early. Try to find the right balance of, again, I'd say showing up 5 or 10 minutes before your interview will be more than enough time. I'd say something that's so important, especially with students, is just be excited, be eager, show that you're so pumped to get these opportunities. The recruiters will likely see a lot of candidates, and if you can show that you're so interested in what they do, you love their business, you know a lot about what they're doing, and you just can't wait to start and get your hands dirty and do tasks no matter how big or how small. That is, I'd say, across the board what people are looking for no matter what the industry. So would definitely recommend just making sure to show that genuine passion. And I'd say at this point too, take a step back and congratulate yourself. You got an interview that's so amazing. Again, just don't stress about it too much. I can't stress enough, the best interviews are the most casual ones where you're confident and eager in your abilities and your story. So just make sure to relax and you're gonna be wonderful.
Liane, I had a question come in about, different things to read before your interview. Mm-hmm. So obviously, the news is what comes to mind. Any other blogs or outlets you think in particular?
Yeah, I definitely think it depends on what you're interviewing for. I always go to something like Google News and look up the company to see what's going on, any articles that were written about them recently. I always read every bit of their website. Every company has an About Me section. Again, I think WayUp profiles are great for this. You can see a lot of that on our website. I would definitely recommend, if it's something like financial services, there are tons of blogs out there. Even just Googling investment banking blog. The WayUp blog is so amazing. I can't believe I didn't think of that first. It has a million resources that people can look at, and we write about everything from interview tips to the day of to the company's profiles. So many great resources there. So I think for general interviewing and general tips, start with the WayUp blog. Once you know what the job is, you found it on WayUp, use that as a resource to learn a bit about the company. And then from there, maybe dig a little bit deeper on their website. And if you're thinking about other trends, again, for something like financial services or tech, perhaps look at some industry news there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course. Let's see. In terms of interviewing, I guess, two more things I'll add. One is if you don't know something, please don't be afraid to say, I don't know, I haven't learned about that yet. Here's my thought process. Let me talk you through it. I think so many people get very flustered in those situations and on occasion will try to pretend that they know something that they don't. And it's so obvious when you're speaking to an interviewer who probably has lots of experience. And a lot of times they don't want you to have the right answer per se. They're looking at your thought process. So just don't be afraid to know what you don't know, to say it, to learn from the experience, because that's normally what the interviewers are looking for. And then lastly, I would say it's always great to follow up with a nice thank you note. And I think the more you can be thoughtful about it, the more that really is impactful. So if you're just going to write something generic to everybody, it's probably not worth doing. But if you connect it on something in particular, or you really think you nailed one part of the interview, I just highlight those sorts of things, make them meaningful and impactful, and those are the thank you notes that are really, really important. Let's see, were there any other questions that have come in?
There was another one about interviewing. It has to do with the thank you note.
Sure.
Somebody just wrote in, how long after my interview should I wait to send the thank you note?
Yeah, I don't think there's any magic number there, but I'd say within 24 hours is probably the right time frame. I don't think you need to do it the second you get off or get out of the interview and back to your apartment by any means. I think take the time to be thoughtful. That evening or the next day is totally fine. If it takes you a little longer than that, I don't think you're gonna lose out on an opportunity because of it, but I think trying to be prompt is good. And I can't stress enough, I think spending the time being thoughtful, and I know it can take some time. They don't have to be long, but not a generic template you find online, but really trying to engage will be way more impactful and let you stand out.
Cool.
Was there anything else?
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Wonderful. So
I know we had some resumes to review.
So I can start with my really basic tips. I'll try not to take too much time, and then we can dive into a few so you all can see and we can talk through them together. I'd say with resumes, I know some questions I get a lot is, when should you or shouldn't you add your GPA? I think a general recruiter rule of thumb is if it's a 3.0 or better, add it. If it's lower than that, don't. I think if it's higher than a 3.0 and it's not there, people are going to assume that it's lower than it is. So that's just my rule of thumb. Certainly do what feels best for you, but just something to think about. I guess on that, I would reiterate that GPAs, majors, which schools you go to are really, really not the most important thing on your resume at all. Even the companies you've worked for, I think so much more important is explaining the experiences you've had. It's explaining what you actually did at those jobs. I think, just because you might not have had a formal internship yet, if you have a camp job, a one-time gig, a virtual job, a shadowing job, and I know we have a lot of things like that up at WayUp, those are amazing. It's just how you tell your story. It's explaining what you did that was impactful about those things, so much more important than the specifics of, again, the GPA is a brand name company. So while it's great to have a mix of those things, I never want anyone to get discouraged. So I guess we can just look through a few of them now. We are just trying to get the screen share up. Are you all able to see this? I know someone wants to text in.
think I can.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I'll quickly talk through a few of these. I think that you can use any format you like. There's no single format, but I will recommend just being consistent throughout, which I think this one so far does a really wonderful job of doing. All of the headings are sort of on the left are the same size, they're the same font, they're sort of all at the exact same spacing. So I definitely recommend doing that. And I love that this resume is also pretty detailed. There's a lot of experience listed here, and they included multiple bullets about what they did at each of these jobs. I love that. I think as detailed as you can get is going to be so helpful for you. And what I would say, and I know this is so hard when you're not used to writing like this, but always make sure all of your bullets are actions, things you really did, things you're proud of. I would definitely recommend anywhere you can using numbers, like this one that they led a class discussion of 13 students. I think that's great. I think when you can use really specific examples like that, if you can use percentages, numbers, it makes you look even more analytical, which I think is really important to most employers. I'd say something on the top that I noticed is this one has an objective, which I really like. I think that's something you can decide whether you want or whether you don't want it. If you're short on space, I definitely don't think it's necessary. And one thing I'll note about objectives is that I would include them if you think it's going to make an impact beyond what you're already saying in your resume. So I'd say, decide on whether you think you have something else to say that your experience isn't saying, and then that's a good way to decide if you want to do something like an objective. Yeah, but again, tons of good experience. And one thing I'd say that's really cool about this too is you can see there's awesome experience here, and it's not all necessarily just internships. There are yoga studio opportunities, teaching assistant opportunities, camp opportunities, and recruiters love to see those things as long as you're able to tell your story about what you really did there and apply it back to what you're looking to do. I'd say one other thing about that is do a little homework on what kinds of responsibilities the roles you're looking for have. Like if you do look at the different WayUp profiles, you can see that the 5 jobs you're looking to apply to all want people who are leaders, or they all want people with strong writing skills. And make sure you talk about how you've shown those in either your classwork, your work experience, your volunteer experience, your club experience, whatever it is. I think the actual experience matters less than being able to eloquently explain why you're the perfect candidate through the skills that you've developed. One other thing I'll note, and you'll notice this on I think all of them that we have today, is one thing I personally love to see is an About Me section, like a quick line that talks about the fun facts about things you've done, countries you've traveled to, what makes you different. And I know on our WayUp profiles, it's actually one of the most popular functions for recruiters. They love that part of it. So don't feel like you can't express yourself that way through your resume too. I know I personally, as a recruiter, always read that line. So I'd highly recommend, if you have some things about you that you feel like aren't shared already, totally add that. Everybody loves it. Are there any questions yet?
Somebody just sent one in, sort of related to what you were mentioning before. How does my major play into internships?
Totally. I personally do not think, I think your major is certainly important, and you're learning a lot of things through school on your major. So obviously I would recommend putting it on your resume, but it is by no means the make or break in your recruitment process. I think, truthfully, when I'm going through a resume as a recruiter, I think the statistic is that you spend 8 seconds reading a resume. So you're looking at very quickly the school, maybe the major, maybe the GPA, and then the vast majority of those seconds, and it sounds like such a short amount of time, but is really screening through the experience. It's screening through who you are and what you've done. So I would always put it, but I'd say, let's say you're interested in startups and you're not a computer science major. Do not stress about it. There are so many clubs you can get involved in, so many work experiences you can have, so many shadow experiences out there that even if you're not a computer science major, you could be a phenomenal coder potentially, and recruiters are happy to look at you if you show that through the rest of your resume. Did that help?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Okay. Should I just pull it in? Okay. Yeah, 2. Great. So we are on to resume 2. Again, with this, I think there's lots of great stuff with the consistency and formatting. You can tell that it's a little bit different, but I would recommend that's totally okay. That you can use, I think, whatever format you want to use as long as there's consistency throughout, like things like the titles are all consistent fonts, consistent alignment, consistent lines. It's a ton of work, and one thing I'd recommend all of you do is ask your friends to review it, go to your career services center, ask them to review it. Again, you're on sessions like this, go to as many of these as possible, read tips on our blog. I think as much advice as you can get about something like your resume, the better and better it will get. I know for me personally, I've been out of school for quite some time, but I am always changing wording and formatting and making things better and better on my resume. So it's definitely a work in progress. Let's see. Yeah, again, I love all of the different experiences here. And while, there are a whole bunch of different things, I think it tells a really holistic story about the student. Some tiny things I'd recommend is on that spacing and alignment, just making sure things like this all completely match, and that's where a few extra set of eyes come in. But I love all the description and that they make sure that they say what their role is at the company, and you can differentiate between that. One thing, and this is again a little stylistic, is you can tell there's a few different things happening in these bullets. I think you could totally do something like this. Ooh, I don't know if it said that correctly, but make something like this into two different bullets to really show. I think it's a little easier to read, and it really shows sort of the sorts of things you've done. Another thing that I would recommend is making sure that what you're saying isn't just descriptive, and that's good, but the great resumes are sort of show what you've actually accomplished. So they're action-oriented, they're metrics-oriented. For example, when you're booking and scheduling appointments, you can say maybe how many appointments, what the appointments were for, why they were important, sort of what the impact was. I think will go even further to making you the most qualified candidate for a certain position.
Awesome. I would love to go back into the chat now.
Yeah.
There are questions coming through that you can see on the screen. And we're back. So
great.
To stay on resume stuff, Jesse just texted an awesome question I saw come across, which is, is there somebody at WayUp who can review your resume? And I guess we have a whole blog dedicated to
absolutely.
This kind of stuff.
Yeah, that absolutely. We have so many blog resources, so I would recommend taking a look there. I know we also have some templates, and maybe if we don't have them available online, which I think we could send them out after this, some really awesome templates you can use as starting points to getting that resume in perfect format. So I highly recommend checking out the blog, which is a great start. And I think using your WayUp profile as a guide, I think we sort of built it in a way where we knew that's what students wanted to highlight, and we knew that what recruiters wanted to know. So using that as a guide when you're filling out your resume is really, really perfect.
Awesome. I had another question come in from Donovan. He wants to know how long you should make your resume before it becomes too long and a bit too repetitive.
A great question. I think probably trying to stick to a page is the general rule of thumb until you have quite a bit of experience under your belt. So I think you can do some things with the font sizes and the margins to give yourself a lot of space, and kind of just forces you to think about what's most important, and I think really use that space to make an impact. So I'd recommend one page.
Awesome. And then tons of resume questions.
Oh, great.
Nicole just texted in, and she wants to know about what you think of creative resumes.
Yeah, I personally think it's awesome to have a creative resume. I think it depends on what you're going into. For example, I was in financial services, as I mentioned, and that was a little bit more sort of you stick to I'd say the format, and a lot of times that is the best way to present yourself in an industry like that. I think the norms are changing a lot, and more people are interested in creative resumes, especially in companies like startup and more creative fields, maybe something like marketing or graphic design. So, I would always do a little bit of research on the company, try to gauge what their culture is like, and if you think that it would be good for that or not. It might be worth having one or two different resumes if you do decide to go with a creative resume to pick and choose when you use it. But I really feel strongly that your resume should show who you are and what you're capable of. And I would never want somebody not to put their own personal touch on something like that.
Awesome. So shifting gears back to the career fair. I love this question. So it's from Kyle, and he wants to know, if I come with my friends to a career fair, is it okay if I go booth to booth with my friends?
Yes, I think that is totally fine. I think the only thing you need to worry about is if your friend is doing all the talking and as such you're not really engaging as much as you would like to. I think whatever makes you comfortable, and a lot of time there's a lot of rapport that can be built if you're having a conversation with a few people at one time. So there's nothing wrong with that. I would just say don't let it keep it from being yourself, from getting the most out of it. If your friend wants a different job than you do, don't be afraid to go by yourself and split up for a little bit of the time.
Awesome. From Leslie, how should we approach a cover letter?
Yes.
Something we didn't touch on, but we can.
We totally can. I think with cover letters, it's there are lots of templates online, and I'm sure that we have a ton of awesome resources on our blog as well. So I would highly recommend checking that out. But I think it's one of those things that you want to make sure is perfect. I know a lot of times you might be writing a lot of them, but double, triple, quadruple check that you are changing the name of the company to the right one, that you're making them meaningful. If you met someone at the career fair, this is such a good time to say, hey, I met so-and-so who was a recruiter at the career fair. We talked about X. It was an awesome conversation. I'm so excited to apply for this job. I think that's where you can really add value in a cover letter. And I would say, never be afraid to name drop, never be afraid to talk about the things you talked about at the career fair. That's how people will remember that they spoke with you. So I think take the time, make it personal, make it sort of perfect, and make sure that perfect in the way that you have the right company in the right cover letter, the right recruiter in the right cover letter, those sorts of things. If they're not right, they can really, really ding you. But if you get it all together, it's such a net positive.
Awesome. Another question. This one's sort of funny, and I think we've touched a little bit on it, but it's from Sarah, and she wants to know, are career fairs really like mini interviews? Do you guys remember us or anything we talked about?
That is such a good question. I think it's probably a little unfair to call them mini interviews. You don't, you don't have to be afraid that everyone's judging your every word the entire time. Certainly not. You're having way too short of a conversation for that. But yes, people absolutely remember the students they met at career fairs. Most recruiters are using them as a tool to get more resumes and start to narrow that funnel down. So it's definitely important. It's not a make or break. I think if anything, it's a way for you to be yourself and get your questions answered. And if you had a great conversation, it can be the reason you're on that interview slate, because the recruiter's like, oh, I met Sarah. She was so wonderful. We have to interview her. So I think mostly career fairs are just beneficial for students.
Awesome. This is back to more interview stuff. This one is about weaknesses. This is something I always had trouble with in college too. When somebody says, what are your weaknesses in an interview, what do you answer? Are you honest? Are you truthful?
Yeah, I certainly be truthful. I think with anything in an interview, do not lie. Do not try to spin it as a strength, even though it's a weakness. I think be honest, but these are the sorts of questions that I recommend doing some thought about before your interview. I think how I tend to answer those questions is to say, maybe I have struggled with this thing in the past. Let's say it's public speaking in the past, but more recently I've taken courses on that. I've practiced in my classes. I've spent some time volunteering to present class projects, whatever it is. I think if you can say, you know, this is something I've struggled with, these are the steps I'm already taking to make it better, think about how much better I can just keep getting at that. So I wouldn't lie, but I think really think about how you want to portray yourself there, and how it's perhaps a learning experience for you, and how you can tell your interviewer that.
Awesome. This one's about high school.
Oh.
I love that. Are high school things, or commitments, I guess they mean extracurriculars,
Yeah.
the student, still relevant on my college resume? When should I take them off?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially your first year or two, if you have some really amazing extracurriculars, don't be afraid to keep them on, especially if you think they're meaningful for the job you're getting into, or whatever it is that you're applying to. I'd say, you know, by sophomore, junior year, you probably have taken a ton of classes. You probably have worked a few jobs, certainly might have been in some clubs. I think you probably have enough sort of new material at that point to sort of shy away from high school and start only putting those college activities on. I think, you know, probably come again by your sophomore, junior year, unless it's like maybe a club you started and you're applying to a job in that industry. Maybe something like that is worth noting. So I guess just being mindful of what you think is relevant for the role, and probably trying to choose the most recent activities where you can.
Cool. Another interview question. I hate this question. Tell me about yourself. I hate it too.
Yes.
Thank you for asking. What do you say when somebody says, "Tell me about yourself"? You know?
Totally.
I hear it's at career fairs too. That can also happen
all the time. I think a lot of recruiters, for better or for worse, leave things really open-ended and in the student's hands. So that can be such a hard one. I think what they're really asking is for you to walk them through your resume. So I typically start that way. I would say, you know, I'm Liane. I am the University Partnerships Manager at WayUp. Prior to working here, I have done this, that, and the next thing, and sort of use it as a natural segue to kind of chronologically walk through my resume. So yeah, I feel like if you do a little bit of preparation and walk through something like your resume, or again, something like your WayUp profile, use those as your templates about the professional things to touch on. And then also, you know, adding some of those fun things that we talked about before, things you like to do beyond just your academics can be interesting.
Thanks. This one's from Zach. I get really nervous before interviews. We all do. Don't worry. Are there any tips that you would give to calm yourself down?
Yes, I really think just having had tons of practice makes perfect and makes you much more confident in your answers. So any way you can practice again with friends, with your career services professional, reading things like the blog and knowing your story, I think is fundamentally so helpful. So you're confident in what you're saying and way less nervous. I still get jitters walking into interviews, and I don't know that it'll ever end. So I can completely relate, but I do think the more confident you are in yourself and the more sort of down you have your own story, when someone asks you, walk me through your resume, when someone asks you, what are your weaknesses, you know those answers in the back of your head, so you're not going to be as nervous going into it. So just being calm, being yourself. Lots and lots of job opportunities out there. Just because you don't get one of them, it probably wasn't the right fit. That's definitely what I've learned throughout my career. I've even on my own, struggled through lots of interviews, and I've seen lots of great, talented students just not be the right fit for our company, but we know that they're amazing students anyway. So don't ever take it personally. Just be yourself, be confident. If it doesn't work out, it probably is for the best. It probably wasn't the right fit, and you're gonna find another amazing job that's probably better for you.
Awesome. I have another question.
Sure.
From Elizabeth. She said, thinking back to when you used to go to career fairs, what are some things that made students really stick out among the crowd?
Yeah, I think it was people who came up and were maybe, I don't know, sometimes it's someone who just asked a really interesting question, someone who was genuinely interested in how you were doing as a person, who I think sometimes people are so nervous about submitting their resumes that they just go, they sign into the sign-in sheet, they hand you their resume, and they leave, and you get that over and over all day. So someone who comes by and says, hey, how's your day going? I'd love to learn more about WayUp. What do you do? What sorts of jobs do you have open? So just trying to be conversational. I think in my experiences, we're the best people I ever met at career fairs.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. Because nobody probably asks you, like, how's your day been?
Totally. Just be yourself and be casual. I think if you start off as someone who's just personal and wants to chat, you can more easily ask those questions that you want to ask, where it can be really, really hard and scary if you haven't built a little bit of rapport.
Awesome. This one's from Michael. What is the funniest interview story you have?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question.
Maybe it's more than one.
There are so many. I think the one that pops into my head first is, and this was for the poor candidate, there was somebody who on his way out, he, I don't know how, but he ended up taking a wrong turn and getting stuck in like a stairwell that locked behind him. And then he had to find my number to call me and then try to explain where he was stuck. So we had a lost interview candidate stuck in it wasn't an elevator bank, it was like a stairwell for a little while, so that was pretty funny. I think in general, there are truly so many, it's like I can't pick specifics, but yeah, again, I can't stress enough, if you're just yourself and you walk into the interview, those are gonna be the best ones, and the funny things always happen, and it's a great story, so God forbid you got stuck in an elevator bank or whatever it is, don't stress, it'll be an amazing story later.
Awesome. Did he get the internship?
He did, actually. Yeah, it's one of my favorite interns. Yes, it was very memorable, and yeah, he got the internship.
That's awesome.
Good question.
Nothing like an entrance.
It's true.
This one came from Mark. He asked, I got tons of business cards, at a recent career fair. How do I go about maintaining those connections?
Such a good question.
Interesting.
And I think, yeah, we all struggle with that. I think, truthfully, writing those thank you notes can be really, really helpful. Spend the time, write thoughtful thank you notes, ask questions. I think at the career fair, you can ask what are next steps in the process, what's your timeline, and then ask for that card. So if you know that in March, so-and-so company is interviewing and you haven't heard anything yet, that's a great time to follow up. So I think really trying to pretty quickly write those thank you notes. Everyone will be in your inbox, setting yourself a few reminders as to what their interview timelines are, and then not being afraid to send a note if you have questions, if you haven't talked to the company in a few weeks or whatever it is, just to always be top of mind to that person.
Cool. And then I guess we might have touched on this already, but another question, again, about career fairs. What is like a quick elevator pitch or a way to get the conversation started with a recruiter?
Yeah.
Maybe it is how's your day going?
Yeah. I think being conversational is really, really great. I think you could totally start by saying, hi, I'm Liane. I'm so interested in what you all do at WayUp. Can you tell me a little bit more? And then from there say, wow, I'm actually a marketing major, and I think so much of what I'm learning is so applicable at WayUp. I'd love to be involved in your process. What's your timeline? So I think keeping it casual, conversational, not being afraid to plug yourself, maybe not starting right away with that, trying to have that conversation for a little while first, but not being afraid to talk about how great you are, because I'm sure all of you are really amazing students and are going to impress so many recruiters. So make sure that they know that.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think we're going to stop taking questions for now. We only have a couple minutes.
Okay.
But Liane, any closing thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I think the fact that you all are here is so wonderful, and you have such a leg up on the process already. Certainly be sure to check out WayUp, to start applying for jobs. Now is definitely the time. So much recruiting happening, so don't be afraid to do that. Do check out things like our blog, and we'll certainly have other events like this in the future. Please keep us as a resource. We're so excited. I cannot tell you how excited I was to do this. I was so pumped to be here to help you, and I would just reiterate, to be yourself. Don't be afraid. If you don't get one job, keep applying, keep persevering. You're going to find the perfect opportunity. We have all been through it before. So you're going to have an awesome time and land an awesome job or internship. And I can't wait to see where everyone ends up.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Here I am. I was right here the whole time. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope that you found this helpful. If you do have any other questions, please email me, Alana@wayup.com, and I can pass them on to Liane.
Yes.
Thanks for joining. As you know, this is recorded, so if you miss us, rewind to the beginning. You can watch it again. Have a great Tuesday night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.